Starting with the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful. My dear students, I hope you all are fine and you are studying whatever we have already covered in the previous lectures. Keep revising the things which we are studying. In today's lecture, we are going to study about data collection tools in research. There are two types of data. One is primary data and the other is secondary data. And there are different tools which are used to collect primary data as well as the secondary data. Primary data are those which are collected afresh and for the first time and thus happen to be original in character and known as primary data. Primary data, in simple words, we can say that it's a sort of data which the researcher collects himself by conducting some interview or through some survey questionnaire. He meets the respondents and collects the data, the first-hand data, by himself or herself. That is called the primary data. Now let's move to the secondary data and see what is secondary data. Secondary data are those which have been collected by someone else and which have already been passed through the statistical process. Such kind of data is called the secondary data. We can, in simple words, we can say that secondary data is the data which we collect from books, journals, articles, and from written material, from the literature which is already available. That is secondary data. For example, from World Bank, we collect some data. We get data from budget. We get data from the research which is already conducted, and we look at the findings of those researches. Such kind of data are called the secondary data. Data is a plural, that's why we use are for this, not is. Keep in mind. One by one, we would be studying about the collection of primary data and then secondary data. Let's start to study about how we can collect the primary data. There are several methods of collecting primary data, particularly in survey and descriptive researches. In descriptive research, we obtain primary data either through observation or through direct communication with respondents in one form or another, or through personal interviews. Means we can collect primary data as first-hand knowledge by meeting the people, by interviewing them, by getting first-hand knowledge from them. There are several methods of collecting primary data. One is observation, other is interview, and the next is questionnaire. These are the major three data collection methods for collecting primary data. Let's study in detail about the observation method. Observation method is a method under which data from the field is collected with the help of observation by the observer or by personally going to the field. Advantages. There are several advantages and disadvantages of each and every method. So let's study about the advantages of using observation method for collecting data for our research. One, subjective bias is eliminated. It means the more objective data, the reliable data is collected through interviews. This is the major advantage of collecting data through interview. Researcher gets current information, means he gets the new information, the current information. For example, he is meeting someone, he is meeting some expert, say for example some expert of linguistics. Researcher wants to get some knowledge. He would interview the researcher and he would get current information. For example, you want to interview Noam Chomsky, and you would be knowing about current information about the fields of linguistics on which he is currently working. Independent to respondents variable. These are the advantages of using observation method for collecting data for research. Sorry, I was using the word interview. It's observation. By observing some situation, you would get more objective data. You would get current information because you are observing the situation by yourself. You would be getting more reliable information and current information. Next is disadvantages of using observation method for collecting data. Disadvantages are that observation method for collecting data, it's expensive method because the observer has to go there every day to observe the situation to get the data. Time consuming, of course, if he is going every day as an observer to collect the data, it would consume his lots of time. Limited information, he would get limited information because whatever he is observing or the situation he is observing, he would get information about that only. Limited information, this is also related with the time as well because the activity is for limited time, so limited information would be collected. Unforeseen factors may interfere with observation task. There may be some unforeseen factors. For example, observer may not be able to reach the place in time, or he is observing but he has some technical issue, he has some other issue due to which he is unable to record the data in the best possible way. So this is the disadvantage of using observation method. And the next is respondent's opinion cannot be recorded or on certain subject. These are the advantages and disadvantages of using observation method. Now let's move to the types of observation which we can use for data collection for our research. One is structured observation and next is unstructured observation. Structured observation is the one that is like structured interview, in which we have already written the questions, we have already prepared the question which we have to ask from the interviewer. So in structured observation, in the same way, when observation is done by characterizing style of recording or observed information, standardized conditions of observation, redefining of the units of observation, selection of patient data, selection of pertinent data of observation, then it is structured observation. Means when you have made a checklist, when you are, say for example, you are in a linguistic classroom and you want to observe teachers' teaching style or students' learning strategies, you would prepare a checklist in which there would be several points which you are going to judge while observing. So such kind of observation method is structured observation, when the observer knows that what are the points he is going to observe. Unstructured observation, when observation is done without any thought before observation, then it is unstructured observation. So like unstructured interview, unstructured observation is unplanned observation. The observer or researcher has no prior thought about it. He has not planned anything. He has not planned a checklist. He did not prepare any checklist what he is going to observe. So such kind of observation is called the unstructured observation. Here are some other types of observation. Participant and non-participant observation. When the observer is member of the group which he is observing, then it is participant observation. In participant observation, researcher can record natural behavior of group. Researcher can verify the truth of statements given by informants in the context of questionnaire. Difficult to collect information can obtain through this method. But in this, researcher may lose objectivity of research due to emotional feelings. So when participant observation is the kind of observation when the researcher or observer is the participant of that group. Say for example, observer or researcher is sitting in the classroom like the students to observe the strategies learners use for learning or teachers uses for teaching. He is there as a member, as a participant. Then it would be called the participant observation. And non-participant observation, when observer is observing people without giving any information to them, then it is non-participant observation. Means researcher is just observing the situation, but he is not the participant. Next is second method of collecting primary sort of data is the interview method. This method of collecting data involves presentation or oral verbal stimuli and reply in terms of oral verbal responses. Means interview is an oral process. Researcher goes and meets the interviewee and interviews him, asks him orally questions, and the interviewee answers those questions. And the researcher may record them for further process, for analysis or for record. Interview method, this is oral verbal communication where interviewer asks questions which are aimed to get information required for study to respondent. Means interviewer would ask question from the interviewee. There are different types of interviews. Personal interviews, the interviewer asks questions generally in a face-to-face contact to the other person or persons. Such kind of interview is called the personal interview. Say for example, you go and meet a linguist to know about the current development in the field of linguistics. So you would meet them personally to ask them questions, to interview them, to collect data that is related to your study. There are several types of personal interview: structured interview and unstructured interview. It's very like the structured observation and unstructured observation. Structured interview is actually predetermined questions. Questions are already written. The researcher has prepared a list of questions which he would ask during the interview process. Standardized techniques of recorded means he would he has already decided what technique he is going to use to record the lectures. Interviewer follows rigid procedure. Time required for such interview is less than non-structured manner interview. Not necessary of skill or specific knowledge. Analysis of data becomes easier. So the data collected through the structured interview is easier to analyze, and no skill or specific knowledge is required because you as a researcher already have a list of questions which you are going to ask from the interviewee. Unstructured interview. Let's study in detail what are the major features of unstructured interview. No predetermined questions, means the researcher has not prepared any list of questions which he is going to ask during the interview process. No standardized techniques. Interviewer has freedom to ask, omit, add any question. So at the spot, interviewer will decide what questions he wants to ask according to the situation. He would create questions at the spot. Ask questions without following sequence. Deep knowledge and skill is required. When such type of interview requires deep knowledge and skill of the researcher, Because if he has knowledge, he has analytical mind, he has critical thinking, he has skill, then he would be able to generate questions at the moment, at the spot. So it needs deep knowledge and skill for conducting unstructured interviews. Analysis of data is difficult, prescribed manner. So analysis of data is a bit difficult for unstructured interviews. Merits of personal interview: information at greater depth, means through interview method we get information in depth. Flexibility of restructuring the questionnaire. The questions which we have prepared for structured interview, those may be flexible. Interviewer by his skill can overcome resistance. Non-response generally low, means you are there to interview someone, so non-response is generally low, means the person who has given you time for interview, he has asked you to come and interview him, he would definitely be responding you, giving you time to interview him or her. Samples can control more effectively, so you are there, you can control the sample, the interviewee. Personal information can be obtained. Interviewer can collect supplementary information about respondents' personal characteristics and environment, which has value in interpreting results. So the interview may be in light environment, in informal environment, so the researcher has more power to ask personal questions as well, and maybe the interviewee would not mind it. Demerits of interview: expensive method. So traveling and going there, meeting the person who you want to interview, it's a bit expensive method. Respondent may give biased information. Maybe the interviewer sometimes gives biased information. For example, you are interviewing a politician, he will not give you the right information. Some executive people are not approachable, so data collected may be inadequate. So some executive people are not approachable, some people are very busy, some high officials are very busy, they do not give you time for conducting interview. Take more time when samples are more. So when you select interview method for collecting data, so it takes lots of time, because you as a researcher or interviewer has to travel to meet the person, and maybe half hour or 20 minutes interview or 40 minutes interview you would conduct. So it's very time consuming, because you would have to travel and you would have to meet every interviewee to collect data. Systematic error may occur. Supervisors has to do complex work of selecting, training and supervising the field staff. So these are the demerits of collecting data through interview. Here is an easy way to conduct interview, that is telephonic interview. Contacting samples on telephone, means you can contact the person you want to interview on the phone, and you can interview him or her on phone. Uncommon method may be used in developed regions. It's an uncommon method and it may be used in developed regions where there is no issue with technology and signals are strong, and the phone calls would not be disconnected. So it's an easy way and not expensive. Telephonic interview merits: flexible compared to mailing method. So it's a flexible method. Faster than other method. Of course it's fast, you can dial the number and you can interview the person. It's faster than other methods. Cheaper than personal interview method. Of course it's cheap, because you would be paying only for the phone call, and you would not have to travel and meet the person. Say for example, you want to interview a person who lives in another city, and you have taken time from him and you are going there one day before the interview, and you are staying there, you are paying bills. So telephonic interview is cheaper than the personal interview. Callbacks are simple and economical also. You can call back always. High response than mailing method, so it's high response means persons are available for telephonic interviews because it's easy for them to. When it is not possible to contact the respondent directly, then interview is conducted through telephone. Replies can be recorded without embarrassment to respondents. You can keep your phone on recording. Call recording can be switched on, and then you can record the lecture. Interviewer can explain requirements more easily. No field staff is required. Wider distribution of sample is possible. Means you can take interview from as many people on telephone as you want because it's easy to conduct interview. Telephonic interview demerits. What are the demerits or weak points of conducting interview on telephone? Little time is given to respondents. Survey is restricted to respondents who have telephones, and the persons who do not have telephone facility, they would not be participating in the survey. Not suitable for interview research where intensive research where comprehensive answers are required because people sometimes do not bother to answer in detail. Bias information may be very difficult to make questionnaire because it should short and to the point. It should be short and to the point. For conducting telephonic interview, you should conduct a structured interview where you have to prepare the questions you need to ask during the interview, and your interview should be very concise and to the point. Other types are focused group interview. Attention is focused on the given experience of the respondent and its possible effects. Then clinical interview, that is not related to our subject, linguistics and literature. Next is group interview. A group of 6 or 8 individuals is interviewed at the same time, like a discussion. Qualitative and quantitative interview divided on the basis of subject matter. For example, whether qualitative or quantitative interview would be conducted. So researchers decides and selects one from them. Individual interviewer meets a single person and interviews him. And we have 2 more examples. Selection interview done for the selection of people for certain jobs. Depth interviews, it deliberately aims to elicit unconscious as well as other types of material relating especially to personality dynamics and motivations. Next we have questionnaire method. We have some time, we can start it. This method of data collection is quite popular, particularly in case of big inquiries. The questionnaire is mailed to respondents who are expected to read and understand the questions and write down the reply in the space meant for the purpose in the questionnaire itself. The respondent have to answer the questions on their own. Questionnaire method. Questionnaire is sent to persons with request to answer the questions and return the questionnaire. Questions are printed in definite order, mailed to samples who are expected to read that questionnaire, understand the questionnaire, and write the answers in provided space. So questionnaire method is in a written form. You prepare the questions and there are certain certain spaces. In the questionnaire there may be open-ended questions as well as close-ended questions. Close-ended questions are such questions which the respondents need to answer in the form of yes or no, or they have to select some option which is already given, like 5-point or 4-point Likert scales: agree, disagree, strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree, like this. This is close-ended questions. And open-ended questions are those questions which need in detail answer. Merits of questionnaire: low cost, even the geographical area is large to cover. so it's low cost. You can get photocopied, you can get the questionnaire photocopied and distribute among the people and collect it later when they have filled it. Answers are in respondents' words, so free from bias. Adequate time to think for answers, so the respondents have adequate time to think and answer. Non-approachable respondents may be conveniently contacted. The people who are not easy to approach, you can send them the questionnaire and they can send you the questionnaire after filling it according to their convenience. Large sample can be used, so results are more reliable. When you are using a questionnaire for data collection tool, as a data collection tool, then you should have a greater sample size, because you can distribute the questionnaire in 400, 500, 300 people, and later you can collect it. Demerits of questionnaire: low rate of return of duly filled questionnaires. Sometimes people do not fill the questionnaires completely. Can be used when respondent is educated and cooperative. It is flexible. Omission of some questions. Difficult to know the expected respondents have filled the form, or it is filled by someone else. Slowest method of data collection. So these are the demerits of questionnaire. Here are some main aspects of questionnaire. This is about general form, then question sequence, and question formation and wording. Then essentials of good questionnaire. Let's see if we have some time left. No, we are running short of time. So in the next lecture we would be studying about the main aspects of a questionnaire. Meanwhile, you can go through it. General form, main aspects of questionnaire is question sequence, question formation and wording, essentials of good questionnaire, and then after that we would be studying about the collection of secondary data. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good weekend and concentrate on your studies and try to listen these lectures twice or 3 times. These are the crux of all information, so you should concentrate more on your lectures. And for detailed study, I have suggested some books. You can follow them, and you can also use material that is available online. Thank you so much, students. Have a good day. Take care. Allah Hafiz.